Carlos, welcome to A House for Arts. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
So I'm so curious to know so many things about the Empire State Youth Orchestra and your work, but let's begin with some of your work experiences and your background. I know that you've done a lot of work, not only in the United States, but also in Colombia and Great Britain. Can you tell us a bit about what your experiences were like there? In particular, how does your work in the orchestra compare in all of these three different places or countries?
Well, yeah, that's very interesting because to me, it's very interesting because I have known musicians from all nationalities, and the more nationalities I interact with musicians, I realize that music is its own nationality, kind of. It's kind of this universality thing. But of course, you can pinpoint some differences. In England, for example, they have the musicians are so professional. Orchestras are incredibly efficient. In sight reading is absolutely phenomenal. That you can put a sheet music, a fresh piece, right in front of them for the first time, and in the first rehearsal, first run through, everything will be perfect.
It's all just like discipline.
Yeah, I mean,
knowing
it's so
exactly how
effective.
Yeah.
So to me, being that, of course, orchestras there have like 3-4 programs a week, which is a huge amount. So being trained there as a conductor was amazing because it was like a real training for me to be really efficient. Whereas in other countries you have more time for rehearsal and to go in other depths. But I think the most interesting thing I feel is the concept of authority. Sometimes in the United States, I feel like, oh, that's the conductor, and it's a lot of respect for that.
So you feel that the hierarchy is a little more pronounced in the United States versus in other places?
Yeah, I don't know. There's a point that needs to be made about that person being the conductor as opposed to being a human, that's another human, and he happens to be our leader in this rehearsal.
Right.
So those things, but I think in general there's this transversal, like universal thing of music that is actually, when we are there, when you start making music, you don't see any nationality, you don't see anything other than humans giving their best for beauty.
I mean, music has always been around since humans have ever existed, right?
Yes.
If you're talking about a universal language of music that we all share, are there also any universal myths or misconceptions that people in America as well as other countries tend to have about orchestra music in particular? Yeah,
well, I mean, this world is full of misconceptions, but I think the biggest misconception about classical music or symphonic music is that it's elitist, or it doesn't belong to me, to you, is not popular. And actually, that's something that I've been trying to think about all my life. And for example, I remember one of my friends, a cousin who came with me. If I can tell you this story, I came with my cousin to a concert, and my cousin doesn't know anything about music. First time being in a symphony. He came with me because I was so excited about this concert, and he said, "Oh, you look so excited. Can I come with you?" And he came for the first time. He loved it so much.
So there's like a full sensory experience, almost kind of like if you go to see a movie or if you go to see a live theatrical performance.
Yes.
It's engaging all of your senses.
Of course.
Right?
I mean, it's also his understanding of the story, the narrative, all the emotions, all everything. I mean, the symphonic world is absolutely vast. And he clapped after the first movement of the symphony. And everybody around us bullied him, like shushing him. "Why do you clap at the first movement? You're not supposed to clap between movements." And my cousin felt, I don't belong here then. And I said, no, you do belong here. Maybe the bullies don't belong here. Like this elitism about the classical music is this thing that only certain people have access to, or you need to be educated in order to enjoy. That's not the case.
It almost seems like there's this cultural resistance to also like call and response, or responding vocally to something within that realm. But what you're kind of trying to tell me, Carlos, at least what I'm hearing, is that you're telling us like that shouldn't be that way, and that's actually a big misconception, even among some audience members
Yes,
of
course.
orchestra.
Yeah, that's a big misconception that music,
Right.
classical music, is this thing over there. Actually, is everything. And for example, the difference between classical music and other kinds of music is also something that
What other kinds of music?
everything, like salsa, tango, Queen, rock, Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber.
You're seeing that kind of that relationship between all those things. Is this something that you teach your students in the Empire State Youth Orchestra?
Well-
How do you, what's its mission, the youth orchestra, and like how do you maybe kind of inform your students about these connections between what we tend to call classical versus pop music, say?
Yeah, well, in education is interesting because there is so much that that the orchestra, the orchestra, the comparison that I was making with language is that orchestra is not an European thing. It's also part of our culture now. And to the point that, for example, my first piece that I did with the Empire State Orchestra, Youth Orchestra, was Sense Maya by Silvestre Revueltas. That is a piece, it's a Mexican composer based on a poem by this Cuban poet, Nicolás Guillén, about, the African and also indigenous ways to kill a snake. It's a very interesting story, but it was written for an orchestra, a symphonic orchestra, a European thing, but it's absolutely Latin American. So that's what I mean that, talking about the misconceptions, that's kind of another misconception. And so talking with the orchestra about the differences between classical and all of that, I recognize that Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, started writing music for orchestra and designed the orchestration in a way that is very educational and pedagogical for the kids. So I really encourage them to revisit this traditional repertoire because it's going to help them in their learning process. However, I always introduce something that is also breaking that concept that classical music is this thing that that
it's
is
something in the past. It's only something
Yes.
belonging to one culture, one race, and that's not true, as you're showing.
And to the point of pop music and all of that, for example, I encourage them so much to improvise. To me, it is difficult to believe that musicians have an instrument in their hands every day of their lives, but they don't improvise. And every time I tell somebody to improvise, they would say, "Oh no, I am a classical trained musician. I don't improvise." And I said, "It's why to put all these barriers in ourselves?" And when musicians start improvising, they just realize that the possibilities of their instrument, the possibilities of expression, the possibilities of performance are so vast.
Right. It doesn't have to be one thing, and when you start exploring other avenues, you start seeing the richness and the nuance.
Oh yeah, of course.
Of the music.
And it has to do with tearing apart those barriers.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, and it's just tearing apart all these barriers that you're doing, which is amazing. During this pandemic, I'd imagine that, I'm thinking about an orchestra and I'm like, oh my God, women's instruments, like how you wear a mask. What are the complications of that? I'm wondering what innovative ways has the Empire State Youth Orchestra been dealing with the pandemic? Are young musicians able to practice and perform right now?
Yes. I mean, well, many things. Well, first, the first lockdown that we could not leave our houses, we needed to get really creative about how to keep our mission alive, which our mission is to challenge and inspire musicians to achieve excellence through music. And we were able to do it with amazing projects. We did this VR, virtual reality 360 performance that everybody recorded from their homes. It was a beautiful project to see how actually from home we could do so much. It was a lot of work.
Right.
And so we wanted to come back to rehearse in person because that exchange of energy means a lot. We are an orchestra because we play in an ensemble. So we were able to start rehearsals with social distancing. It was interesting you mentioned the instruments because we have flutes, we have clarinets.
Right, it's blowing air out, like into the room.
It was a huge concern that we had. But we were very privileged to have a space that has the best filtration possible. Also, we doubled the social distance as possible. And the most important thing, we used PPE. For the
What's PPE?
Personal protection device,
yes.
like a mask, basically masks for for the instruments. So it was kind of funny to see a bassoon with a mask around it.
With a big hairnet on it. Yeah.
Yes. So the musicians needed to be protecting the air that comes out of their instruments so it doesn't go around. And after our entire concert cycle, we had so many rehearsals, more than 300 musicians in different ensembles.
Wow.
No one got infected with COVID. And of course,
That's amazing.
we had so many strategies, quarantine, and so we had to live stream every rehearsal in case a musician was rehearsing from home because they couldn't leave because of quarantine.
Right.
So we would live stream the rehearsals for 2 or 3 weeks if they needed to be away. So
were audiences able to watch any of these live streams?
yes, so we had this the first time that we had a concert for virtual audience. So we recorded all our ensembles, 13 ensembles, in person, of course, social distance, with all the masks, with all the filtration, everything, and recorded it and presented it to a virtual audience through our own virtual concert hall. It was an absolute success. I am so thrilled. I was so nervous because we have never done this. And
well,
it was
where can folks look for more recordings of more audience or more performances, moving forward?
Well, everything is now in our website, esyo.org.
Okay.
You can find there our virtual console that is hosting things from the past, from even this pandemic, the virtual situations that we did, and also future performances. So we're so proud that we now have a virtual concert hall. We never thought about having a virtual concert hall.
That all sounds fantastic. Carlos, thank you so much for being on A House for Art.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure. Yeah, it's very nice to meet you.